Hey folks, so today's mission is to build a tombstone for Lego scaled images. The last video I did was a tombstone for 6 scale action figures. This is much smaller. Minifigs are about 1.5 inches or so. What we're going to use is popsicle sticks. Popsicle sticks are our weapon of choice. I ended up playing a little bit of Goldilocks with these. In reverse, the started off with the regular size crafting popsicle sticks and compared them to the minifigure, and they were just simply too narrow. So I tried pulling out these much wider sticks that I keep on hand, and they just ended up being way too big, and they really weren't useful. But I found this one stick in the bottom of my drawer that I think I got from Michael somewhere, and it ended up being just the perfect width and size for a minifig. So I decided to go with that one. It's the only one I had, so hopefully this will work out. So the one problem I have with these sticks is that they're nice smooth wood, and what I'm trying to create is the effect of stone. So I need to find a way to rough up these surfaces and make them stone-like. So the way I decided to do it was just grab a stone from my garden and just beat the ever-living crap out of this stick and just put in a bunch of dents and divots and all that type of rough texture all over the wood just to give it that rough stone look. Beat the ends as well, and then adding just a little stone texture. As you can see, the texture is added in, and it looks much more like stone than a regular popsicle stick. A little bit more beating up, and I think we're good to go. Now, I envision this gravestone being kind of an old rough stone, so I made sure to smack the edges a little bit just to make sure the edges were rough, and then rub the stone against the stick just to add a little bit more dents and divots. I really wanted to put some age and some life into this stone. And I clean up a few burrs, and then it was time to add some scratches and some cracks, and to do that with a sharp knife. Now, if you're a kid at this point, please seek parental help with these knives. They're very, very sharp and they can hurt you. Use the edge of the knife and just carve in little rocks or little scratches and little divots and little cracks. You don't have to go super deep, but make sure you get the tops and the sides so the crack looks like it's gone through all the rock. And just add a little bit. You don't need a lot of cracks, but just a little bit goes a long, long way. Just to make sure to pull that knife away from all your fingers because we don't want to cut ourselves. These knives can be incredibly sharp, so a little bit of knife safety is important. But with a little bit of care and a little bit of concentration, it can be done fairly safely. And after a few minutes worth of work, you end up with a nice stone that has all these nice little cracks and creases in it. And just keep on working it until all of the little splinters and other little bits from the wood are nice and smooth. So now that we've got everything all nice and smooth and all of the textures are built into the wood, it's time to start painting. And we're going to do an approach by adding dark colors at the base and then adding successive lighter colors in order to build up the color texture of the wood. So we'll start off with some basic black. I'm using basic craft paints that you can find at any crafting store or Walmart. And these are the 50 cent to dollar type paints. So just grab a paintbrush and some black paint and just paint over all the area where it will become the tombstone. Like I said, I left the handle just to have something to hold on to, which makes life a whole lot easier. But I cover all the wood that I need to in the black paint, and then make sure that when you're done, you clean all the little goobs and gobbers from the cracks and crevices that you put in there so you don't fill them up with paint. And the more thorough job you do now, the better your paint job is going to look in the future. So you want a nice, even, consistent coat of paint. And now that we have the black paint on there and we let everything dry, then we're going to put on our first gray coat. I'm picking a dark stormy gray, I believe it's called. And I'm going to, again, cover the entire stick, at least the entire part of the stick that's going to become the stone, in this dark gray. And I want to get into every crack and crevice. And when I'm done with that, I want to make sure I get all the excess paint out of the cracks and crevices, all the goobers and gobs, get them gone. You want a nice even coat covering everything. But the nice thing is, because we have that black layer, if we do happen to miss a spot, especially in the deeper cracks, then it's not too bad because that black will just end up looking like shadow. And when you're done with everything, you can just simply let it dry. Or if you're like me, you use a hair dryer to dry everything nice and quickly. Otherwise, you set it aside for about half an hour and it should be dry and ready for the next pass. So now that's done. The next pass is actually what's called a dry brushing technique. So if you take a fresh new brush, and we're going to add 2 layers of gray onto our stone. So the way this works is you take your brush, usually an old gooby brush with the bristles are kind of rough, and then dip it in the paint. Load up the brush with paint, and then you want to take all the paint off in like a paper towel and clean off most of that paint. So what you're left with is just a little bit of paint and the bristles. And then you start painting just by lightly brushing the brush over top of the stone, and then that just grab some of the paint on the highlights, and so you leave a darker base, and then the raised edges become the medium gray, and that just helps bring out all of those details that we put in the stone smashing step. And you want to cover it about 50% of the stone with gray. And then we grab the next color up. This is kind of like a linen color. It's almost like a white, but any whitish color will do, but you don't want straight white. So same process. We load up the brush with paint, take off most of it on the brush, and then this time even more lightly, gently brush it over the stone. So just the very, very tips of the texture get highlighted. And so we only want like about 20% coverage on this at the most. And that just gives a lot of contrast between the deeper, darker crevices and the much lighter top. So that's basically our tombstone. So once it dries, we can go on to the next step. Now, at some point in time, we're going to want to put letters on our tombstone because tombstones tend to have letters, unless you're going for that so old that the letters have worn away look. But I couldn't find a really great way to put letters on here, but there was a tutorial coming up to show you how to add letters in Photoshop. So watch out for that. So the next step after this is to just cut off the part that isn't the stone. So again, I measure out on the minifig just to get the right height. And then I grab a metal ruler. Always use a metal ruler when you're cutting, because if you use plastic, you're just going to gouge out the ruler, and then you no longer have a handy straight edge. You just have a broken piece of plastic. So use a metal ruler when you're doing this. And then just with light pressure, start cutting the wood away. If you have a saw or a small saw, you could use it here. But I just had this crafting knife. So just take a few swipes, adding a little bit of pressure, but you don't want to like caveman go full power onto this, because that way the knife will bind and then it has a tendency to kick, and that's where you get injuries. So just do light, even strokes 5 or 6 times, maybe 10 times, and then eventually you'll cut through and you'll be able to get the 2 pieces separated. And when you have the piece separated, you have a nice tombstone, and the next step is to simply throw it in front of your camera and start taking some photos. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.